woke up this morning, tied my boots up, 'cause I knew it was gonna be a long day. Tied my truck up.
Alright guys, this is James. Empty Pockets Garage. Story time. This is about my first car that I ever got. Well, first one that ran, that I got to drive. I was 14 years old. It was like the summer of '79. A neighbor around the corner had a 1968 Toyota Corolla. Had a cracked block or a bad head gasket or something. Anyways, they had coolant oil. And I mowed their grass to help them out, because they were, even back then, they were older. So I asked them what they were going to do with the car. And they said they were going to junk it. I asked if I could buy it. And they said, well, no, you mow our grass, you can have it. It's a fair trade. And the old man Clyde said, actually, I'm probably getting a better deal of the trade. So, anyways. A gentleman by the name of Shorty. I was raised by a single mother, so I didn't really have a guy influence around for cars. I just knew I loved cars. And I'd hung around Shorty's house since I was like 11, 12 years old. And he taught me how to do body work and paint and things of that nature. So I talked to Shorty about this and asked him what it would take to fix the engine, and he laughed because he's a Chevy guy. He's like, you can't fix that. The only thing you can do is improve it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you need to put a Chevy engine in it. And we're talking about a '68 Toyota Corolla, guys. They don't fit. Well, at least I didn't think they'd fit. So I said, well, I don't have the money to buy an engine and tranny. And he started giggling. He said, well, I got a 307 and a Power Glide sitting out back behind the garage I'll never use. You can have it. I said, oh, cool. How do I get this in there? He giggled again. He said, push the car down here and we'll figure it out. Because I help him do body work all the time, and he's always, I just figured it was I'm doing stuff and I'm learning. I never thought about payment or nothing like that, kid. So I pushed the car. It's like almost 2 blocks down the road, which those things are surprisingly heavy, by the way. But anyways, so I get it down there, and he pulls out a tape measure, and he does a bunch of measuring. He says, okay, he says, we're going to have to remove a few things. I said, okay. So he breaks out the torch and he starts cutting away the inner fender wells, which, it's a part of the structure on those cars. But he knew what he was doing. He cut away the right stuff. And by the way, this wasn't my first car. This is how I got to my first car. So we get it all cut out, and we had to remove part of the tranny tunnel and all that stuff inside. And it had a nice interior too. So I took care of it when I took it apart, and we were gonna put it back together nice. So we get this engine down in there, just sitting in there. A friend of his named Bob, who lived down in Cincinnati, Ohio, who owns a body shop, come up to visit, and I come home, or actually I went somewhere with my mom, and we come home, and then I walked around, because I lived on the opposite block from where Shorty lived, so I walked around there, and they're standing there with the garage door open, drinking beer, looking at my car. And so, Shorty's telling him a story about, what we're doing with it and all this other stuff, and Bob took a liking to this car. The body was decent on it, really nice. And he wanted something unique for his body shop. At that time down there, he was like contracted. They had like a cab company in Cincinnati where they took old cars, like 40s models, fat fendered cars, and turned them into cabs and did like a tourism kind of thing. But anyways, he wanted something unique. Even though it was a little Toyota Corolla, he wanted to have something that was different. So he's in there talking, and he's talking about, how wild this looks, all this engine, there's no way to put the hood on it because it's stuck out of the hood. We'd have to cut there'd be hardly no hood left anyways. He looked at me and said, boy, I got a 68 Raleigh Sport Camaro sitting behind my shop. We haven't moved in 2 years. We probably will do nothing with it ever. It's fair shape. It did run when we parked it. If you got $100 in this car, I'll trade you for that 68 Camaro. I was like, oh, really? Oh, no. And then, it's like $100. You might as well have said $1,000 to a 14-year-old in 1979. But one thing led to another. I also, during the summer, worked at a junkyard back then when people under 18 could work in a junkyard and use a torch and stuff like that to pull parts. So between my mom and the junkyard, everybody wanted me to have this car, and I was tickled. I never thought, it was like a dream come true. 68 Raleigh Sport Camaro, right? So between one thing led to another, Shorty told me that he would go down in his truck. We'd make a homemade tow bar. We'd tow the Toyota down to Cincinnati. This is Springfield, Ohio, so it's like an hour and 20-minute drive. So I was down to he just needed gas money, which was like $20 back then to go to Cincinnati and back in an old 69 GMC with a 400 small block, 4-speed, granny gear. Anyways, so I borrowed that $20 because that's what I needed. I had the 100. I didn't have nothing else. So I borrowed that $20 from my mom, which, my mom's a single mother raising 3 boys. $20 was a lot to pull out of one's pocket and give it to a kid. Even though I'm her son, I was responsible to get that money back to her. Anyways, another story. I got it back to her, by the way. So we went down there, and I'd never seen this car. I don't know how bad it was going to be. I don't know how anything, just by what he said. And you know how people talk stuff up sometimes. But I was just completely shocked that he was willing to trade this old 1968 Toyota Corolla with a 307 small block and a power glide that we'd never even got running yet for this Camaro. So we get down there. Oh my gosh. The Camaro had torque thrust wheels all the way around it. It had rust, but it had a 327 power glide in it. And, it was a straight car, no dents. Straight car, vinyl top. Hideaway headlights. So, cut the story short. We went down there, we did the trade. Hooked it up to the tow bar, towed it all the way back to Springfield. Got it in the driveway, and within 2 hours after getting it home, we got it started. The only thing I had to do to it to get it, it had brakes and everything. I didn't have to do nothing else. The only thing that was wrong with it, it had a stuck thermostat, and I broke the stud. One's a bolt, one's a stud on those old thermostat housings. So I broke it. So anyways, I get the housing off, heated up the intake, worked it back and forth with a pair of vice grips, got it out. Didn't have a thermostat, didn't have the money for a thermostat, so we gasket, make it silicone, and put the housing back on it. And I was driving it that night. That was, to me it was like the ultimate story. 14-year-old, no money, hardly no money, owning a 1968 Raleigh Sport Camaro, running, driving, no dents, a couple small rust holes and the quarters. That was it. So, for $120, I owned a 1968 Riley Sport Camaro. And on a side note, back then, and my mom was pretty cool too, because she, it is what it is at different times. That summer I turned 15 just before school. My birthday's in August. I was driving my Camaro to school at age 15. Awesome feeling. Now I didn't get to drive it a lot, but if I needed to go somewhere short distances, my mom never complained at all. So I was literally running around Springfield at 15 driving a Riley Sport Camaro. Don't get much better than that, boys, girls, whoever's watching. So anyways, this is my story time. How I got my very first running and driving car for $120. And to go a little bit further than that, like I said, I paint and body. That's what Shorty taught me how to do, although he was a great mechanic. I wanted to paint it, do some body work, and back then we didn't have MIG welders or anything like that, so I made some patch panels, drilled some holes, recessed the holes, pop riveted in, ground down the rivets, did the body work, and I needed paint. And I did all this in my driveway, by the way, the body work. I had an electric sander, stuff like that. I got from Shorty, by the way. So I said, Shorty, how much is paint going to cost for this thing? And he always giggles when he already knows the answer. Love the man. So we went down, and because he paints a lot of stuff, so he had all these cans of used paint under the steps in his basement. And he just he picks them up and shakes them, see how much is in each one. And then he says, well, what color you want? I said, I don't know, black. And he looks at me and he's like, it's not going to be black. So he pops up all these cans, and we carry him upstairs. He, pull all these cans out, carry him upstairs. He pops the lids open, starts dumping can into another can, and then he stirs it up, and we come up with almost a gallon, and it was like a dark charcoal gray. So that was the color of my first car, was dark charcoal gray with a black vinyl top, black interior, automatic staple shifter on the floor, 327, single exhaust, but it had a glass pack on it with aluminum torque thrust wheels, bias tires, which I literally roasted all 4 tires off over the first part of the season there. I'd get the one tire ball because it was not a posi, and I'd switch the tires around, and I'd get one ball, and I switch. By the time school started already, and then I'm talking about just a few weeks, I needed tires. All 4 tires were bald. Anyway, that's another story. But story of my first car, guys, girls. So this is James, Empty Pockets Garage. Please like, share, subscribe if you will. Comments, I say it every time. Give me some comments. Tell me about your first car. And this is the first of many story times, because I've owned a lot of cars in my life. I've had a lot of unique stories about how I've got a hold of cars and what I've done to them and what I shouldn't have done to them. So I appreciate y'all watching. Like I said, this is James, Empty Pockets. Till next time, I'm out.
Persecuted by your mouth, exploited by your mouth, subjected to your game. Now there's nothing left to try to make class from between ruins everything. Not good. Now